Welcome to Indie Film Podcast. I'm Victoria.
And I am Chuck. We're two independent filmmakers that wanted to make a podcast where we share our mistakes so that you can avoid them.
Follow us on our journey as we attempt to break into the indie filmmaking scene.
Or just incur more debt. Which
is more likely.
Yes, we're going to get more and more in debt because film stuff is expensive. We've talked about that a lot.
We have.
Let's talk about some perils of production because February is Perils of Production Month.
Yes. And specifically, Chuck, I would love to hear your perspective on a lot of this because today we're going to be talking about location sound screw-ups.
This is the bane of indie films is good audio.
Yeah.
And if you're in indie film, you know how hard it can be to get good audio.
I mean, if it's even possible.
Yes, it is possible.
It is.
It is possible. I want to share a bunch of mistakes that I've made because over the last 10 years, I feel like I've gone from somebody who doesn't know anything about audio to someone who's somewhat competent, and I can get some things done on set and in post to help make things sound like they're at least passable. So that it doesn't detract from the audience, because that's the big thing with audio is that you don't want to pull the audience away because of bad audio.
And they have done, I don't remember the name or where the study came from at this point, but they did a rather extensive study on visuals and audio and found that people will watch a bad movie and a movie that looks bad if they can hear it.
Yeah.
But if they can't hear it, doesn't matter how pretty it is, they will walk out.
True. So bad audio can ruin your movie, bad video, you still might be okay.
You might be.
As long as it sounds okay.
If it sounds okay and the acting's good and your story is still really solid, you can get away with some pretty shoddy camera work.
Yes. So do you want to share some embarrassing audio stories on film sets, or should I start?
I don't even know where to start. I think you could look at the vast majority of films I made, especially prior to college. College was where it started. I figured out the audio matters.
Well, you got media training in college, and
I did get a degree in cinematography.
Yes.
Perhaps I should have done more audio. Mm-hmm. That would have been smart. But I did not. I think probably one of the most embarrassing ones was definitely on me for renting some mics.
Okay.
Because I thought that would be a good idea. And I was trying to plug them into my Zoom. Which, major shout out to Zoom. I love I think it's the H4n that I have. And really like it.
A lot of indie filmmakers have used an H4n.
Yeah.
They're an old machine, but they're a staple and they're very reliable.
They are so reliable. Like the one I have now died. It was dead. Completely dead. It died. I don't know what happened to it. Water spilled on it, something. I don't know. I left it alone for 6 months. It powered right back up again.
Oh, nice.
It has a little difficulty reading memory cards now.
Okay.
But it still works.
Right on. That's good. So what did you do when you rented your microphones?
Right. I tried to plug them into the Zoom. I don't believe I did that right, or I didn't change the input correctly.
Okay.
And the audio was just bad. It was really muffled. We were shooting in a bar, so we had all these fridges that we were not allowed to turn off, which is a mistake.
Okay.
Right there. But that's a location issue. And all I really heard were like people's footsteps, maybe some of what they were saying, and then a lot of fridge hum. Okay. And I couldn't figure it out until I kind of realized, I don't think this was picking up the lav mic sound. I think it was picking up the sound from that little, as I bump my mic, I'm just so bad at audio. I'm hitting my mic too. The little cross left, right? Channel?
XY mics.
That's it. Yeah, I know so much about audio. Yeah, so that was I'm pretty sure it was just pulling that sound.
Yes.
And not the mic sound at all.
Which is possible. You definitely want to know your equipment.
Yeah.
Because I have messed up that as well.
Oh, that makes me feel a little better. Thank you.
So Tascam, I think that's what I started on, was just a Tascam unit. Mm-hmm. It's got the 2 mic inputs. It doesn't have the built-in microphones, but it has the 2 mic inputs as well as a 1/8 inch, a 3.5 millimeter, like a headphone jack, but that'll take a stereo signal from another source.
Yeah.
And you got to learn how your audio equipment works. And a lot of it's tricky because you can be monitoring something. You have your headphones plugged in, and it might be set to monitor on certain channels, but those channels might not be set to record.
Oh.
And so all these recorders work differently, and even within the same set of recorders. So this we're recording right now on an F8N Pro. It's a Zoom product. Any of the Zoom F products are really pretty darn good.
Yeah.
Because the preamps on them are exceptional. So if anyone's an audio nerd, a lot of the times when you have one of these microphones that we're using, this is an Electro Voice RE20, and then you have an RE320, and those are what they call gain-hungry microphones.
Meaning?
You have to turn up the preamp a lot because these are sending a very weak signal to the recorder. And so if you have something like a Zoom H series or that old Tascam that I used for a lot of my location sound when I first started doing that on indie film sets, when you turn it up in post to get it to the level that you want it to be, or if you add some compression to even out the audio, the vocal sounds, then you can start to hear that preamp hiss in the background. Yeah, and it's a legitimate thing, especially when you add compression.
Yeah.
So I've definitely made those mistakes on set as far as, I guess the biggest one was not noticing that a fridge was on.
Oh, fridges.
Yes.
Fridges are the worst.
The fridges will ruin, if you're shooting inside of a home, a fridge is your nightmare. Fridge HVAC. Those are awful. So one trick that I learned from Cody Newton is when you turn off your fridge, put your keys in there, because I've also screwed up I've lost 2 refrigerators full of food, 2 refrigerators and freezers full of food because I turned them off. We were shooting till midnight in my house, and then I didn't I didn't remember to turn the fridge back on. And in the morning when I woke up, everything was warm and I had to throw it all out.
Oh.
It's very gross.
And with the price of eggs right now, that's just devastating.
Yes, that's a lot. You don't want to be losing a dozen eggs.
No.
You have to get a loan out for breakfast.
Yeah.
So, yes, keys in the fridge, that's a good one. But on location...
Cody actually, I believe, the last time I worked with him, still uses that. And I've adopted that for all my sets too.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would feel really bad if I did that at somebody else's house. So as location sound person, I always take my keys, I put it in their fridge when I shut it down so that I remember when I'm leaving. I can't leave without my keys, so I got to turn the fridge back on. HVAC, people will notice that.
Usually.
Because when you're cold or too hot, then it becomes an issue immediately.
You at least notice that. If you're finishing your shoot at midnight, you're exhausted and you're going to sleep, you're not going to notice that your fridge is off.
Yes. So nuanced some of the things that I've screwed up doing location sound is not getting the lines clean when you're on the close-up.
Okay, so what do you mean by getting the lines clean?
So when you have somebody that's on screen and acting, when you're on a wide shot, hopefully you have a lav mic for them.
Okay, so you are a proponent of lavs. You like them.
I don't like lavs as much as I like a boom.
Oh, okay.
A boom sounds better to me. A lav sounds a little bit more tinny.
Yeah.
And it's because it's just a smaller element.
Yeah, that's what you get.
It's not as nice of a microphone. It's just physically not capable.
No.
Because it's smaller. But what it does do is it gets you up close audio. So you want the microphone to be as close to the actor as possible.
A lav is going to do that.
A lav is nice, but then there's also the issue if they move around a lot. Like if you're off access, you can hear it on my microphone right now as an example. So I'm talking into my microphone. And if I move past it, it sounds different.
Yeah.
And that's what happens on a lav sometimes. Those are omnidirectional, but sometimes if they're, you can get like a sound shadow, if they're talking too far away.
Then suddenly
looking over their shoulder, all of a sudden it sounds like they're in it. The EQ sounds different. Like the bass signal and the high signal sounds different as they're moving their head.
Which has to be balanced, right? Because it would be very weird for someone who's talking to somebody just across the room or whatever to turn their whole bot. Like that would be weird though.
Yeah.
So how do you fix that?
So in my experience, wide shots, obviously you want to get what you can.
Yeah.
Always record. That was a big mistake I've made too, when you listen to the director and they're like, it's okay, we don't need audio for this. Don't listen to that ever. Always get audio and always slate.
So that would be another Chuck's pro tip.
Yes.
For location sound.
Pro tip for location sound, always record, even if it's a quote unquote silent
MOS
take.
Or something like that. Just ignore it. Ignore the director saying, no, we don't need you.
Yeah.
Ignore
this
it.
is just going to be an insert. We don't need sound for this. You might need sound for it.
Yeah.
Even if it's, just establishing shots. Sometimes you'll be out in the middle of a building and then a car will go by. And it's like, we don't need sound for this because this is just going to be score. It's in post, it's going to sound way better if you have that sound of that car going past the camera, even if it's just slightly turned up into the mix, than if it's just going to be music only.
Because it still makes you feel like you're in the moment as opposed to just watching it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. That's how I feel about it when I process. So always make sure that you're recording.
Yeah.
And make sure that you're getting all the actors' lines as cleanly as you possibly can in the close-up. And the reason for that is the noise is obviously going to be a factor of distance. And if you're using a boom, you want to make sure that you're using that boom for a majority of the audio. That's one of the issues I have with lavs, is if you're mixing a lav and a boom and you're using lav for one part and then cutting up and then using a boom for the close-up, it's going to sound weird.
Oh.
It's going to sound
you want
different.
to be able to have them both mixed together and use them both as you cut between the wides and the close?
I would personally rather use the boom if I can, if I have enough control over all the location sound, if there's not too much noise.
Okay, so what you're saying by getting the lines clean is that you would rather always record on the wide for sure.
Yes.
But grab the audio of the line in the close-up and then maybe take that boom audio from the close-up and use it on the wide?
Try to match it as much as possible, depending on whether or not you can see their models moving.
Fair.
So it's always a factor of distance and noise in the environment, and sometimes you can't control that. We were on a shoot for one of our chit chats that was inside of a restaurant that we set up, and the location was amazing. Yeah. They let us come in and use it free of charge.
Awesome.
But their HVAC was the loudest HVAC I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
And when that was kicking up, sometimes it was in negative 12 dB, which if you don't know,
I know that's loud.
So if you're not familiar with that, negative 12 dB is usually where speech needs to be sitting when you're mixing it for film.
Yeah.
So it needs like -9 to -12. You can go a lot louder than that if the person's shouting, obviously.
Yeah.
Like 0 is as loud as you can get before it clips. That's the reference there. So this location, it was super, super loud. And yeah, I wish that I would have been a little bit more on top of it on the boom operation in that environment, because you have to be very careful about the noise for consistency between the takes. Because sometimes another fan will kick on, and if you're doing the editing, you have to just destroy that much more audio when you're trying to clean it up. Yeah, so we can get into that when we talk about the post-production. But on set, you want to try to get, if it's noisy, I kind of wish I would have demanded that the actors speak up louder too, because that's such an easy fix.
Yeah, that helps. And helps when you have actors that can.
True. And these were both more film actors than theater actors, so they weren't necessarily that used to needing to project, but we were in a really loud environment. And so if they can give me more volume and I can get closer to them, it's going to be a lot less noticeable, that signal to noise ratio, and it's going to be easier to work with in post. And if I would have felt really bad if I would have taken that audio and sent it to somebody else to do. That would have been kind of a jerk move of me. But realistically, you can't control a lot of times when you're on set what it's going to sound like.
No.
Indie film especially, unfortunately.
Especially if you're going on donated or free locations.
Yes.
You get what you get.
Mm-hmm.
And you make it work.
We did a shoot where there was a very large
I was going to say that.
HVAC.
Yeah, where we had a location for a documentary. So it's just somebody sitting there talking.
Mm-hmm.
And it looked beautiful. It was
did.
so pretty. I was in love with the shots. And Danny framed up great shot. And even Elliot framed up like solid. Like it looked so good. And the HVAC was so loud.
Yeah.
And these aren't even actors because it's a documentary. They don't project.
No.
They talk like shy, quiet people that don't want to be on camera, really.
True. But we got it figured out.
Yeah. Well, that was actually going to be my number one audio pro tip. Whenever you can, just hire Chuck.
There we go. Hire somebody that knows location sound. But
Yes.
it's hard to find them here in Idaho.
They are a smaller skill set. They are a smaller skill. It's a large skill set, but they are harder to find, I guess.
I think part of it is that audio gets ignored a lot on film sets, which is unfortunate because I've been on a lot of different film sets, and some directors are more audio forward than others, but it's not uncommon for me to just run into somebody that doesn't care at all or isn't even thinking about it. And it's like, sorry, but we might have to do that take again because a giant semi truck drove past and it wasn't on the camera.
So it's going to be weird.
I can hear it, and AI is not going to fix
AI is not going to remove that.
Yeah.
Don't throw it into DaVinci's new audio remove tool, their AI fix, auto enhance, or whatever they're called. Don't do that. Don't do that.
No, it works sometimes.
I tried that with a film not that long ago.
Oh, okay, and it didn't fix it.
I think, and this was a project that I just co-handled everything with Elizabeth Finlay on.
Okay.
And I think Elizabeth and I would both agree. That feature is still very much so in beta.
True.
That feature is in beta.
I tried to use it one time for a very noisy scene that I was trying to restore. And I thought, well, let me use this new AI feature that I've heard so much about.
Because it sounds so cool.
Yeah, you'd think it'd be amazing. But what ended up happening is that it added in words that didn't exist because this person was rustling, I think it was papers around or something. She was opening a book, and it was in a very loud location. I wasn't in charge of the location sound. I was just fixing this audio in post. And so you could hear that there were pages rustling, but you could also hear all the sounds of the city and cars and all that nonsense. And the AI thought that was speech. And so when she was opening the book, it was like this weird.
Oh, so it gave it a voice and everything. Mm-hmm. That's terrifying, actually. Yeah. That's very concerning. I don't like that. That makes me very uncomfortable. So that's like AI hallucinating on a whole new level.
Mm-hmm. So don't think that you're going to be able to fix your location sound by putting a microphone on top of your camera and pointing it and being like, it doesn't matter what's going on, AI will fix it. It's going to sound like garbage.
That's what I did through most of my college career.
I will say though that you can get a good location sound setup now very inexpensively.
You can, which is nice that they're starting to make them more accessible. But also, don't they have good, they retain their value pretty well for the expensive gear too, right?
Microphones, you're going to be okay, which is nice. A microphone is like a lens. Yeah. Anytime I buy a new microphone, I'm not super concerned about getting, overcharged on that because I know that I can turn around and sell it for a decent chunk. You'll lose money still when it's used.
Well, yeah.
But it's like a lens. Yeah. It's like you're still going to be able to recoup some of that stuff. It probably is a good idea to rent equipment and try it out first. But I mean, on those lower end microphones, we shot most of the Chit Chat series it was $160. I got it on sale, an Audio-Technica line gradient mic. And we've upgraded since then at Lower Gentry Studios to, $1,000 and $1,200 microphones. And you can tell the difference on those microphones. Yeah. And they have much better rejection from the sides. So those are called line gradient microphones. And you can hear if you're slightly off axis and you're 4 or 5 feet away with that boom pole and you just rotate your hand ever so slightly, you can hear a difference.
You notice it.
And it's like, oh, this is not pointed directly at the person.
Yeah.
And so it requires a little bit more skill to use one of those higher quality microphones. But then when we got in that environment where we were doing that interview in that loud HVAC system, when we had those more expensive microphones, they did a better job of rejection. Yeah. So they didn't pick up as much of the ambient noise. It was more if you point it at the person's sternum, you're going to get a lot of their voice in spite of the noise. There's still limits to that, unfortunately. Yeah. You still need to make sure that your noise isn't too high and that the vocals are registering pretty high in your recorder. But for the most part, those microphones, even the cheap ones, they work fairly well.
Okay, but it's the importance of having one specifically as opposed to just using say an on-camera mic.
Yeah, or a lot of times you'll see indie filmmakers, and this works great. They'll just take a lav and they make those little Rode wireless transmitters now, and they're pretty inexpensive, and they work great.
Oh, nice.
You know, you just put a lav on your actor. You're like, I don't have location sound. And it'll be fine. I mean, for documentary stuff too, that's sometimes you just got to do that.
Yeah.
And people are a lot more forgiving for documentaries as far as audio is concerned.
They are,
I feel
which
like.
is nice.
Yeah.
Anything that I feel has that grittier, so reality type stuff is going to get a little bit of a pass, which is good because reality sets are chaos.
Blair Witch found footage
style stuff. Yeah, you're gonna get a little bit of leniency from your audience. Maybe you hope.
Yeah. And it's good. It's good to have a lav on the actor if you can swing it.
Yeah.
You know, and they do make them now that are cheap that you can actually monitor at the same time, or plug them right into the camera and use that audio. If you're in a pinch, I mean, it's better to have that than nothing. So if you can't find a location sound person, lavs are totally fine. You just want to make sure that you're listening. That's the other
key. Listen while you record it,
because clothing rustle is
very real.
Yeah, and it happens, and it can ruin audio.
It can
ruin audio, so you got to make sure that you can monitor that. Because I know Zoom makes some nice little recorders for lavs, but you can't monitor them.
No,
they're just kind of like a set and forget. So unless it's on the outside of their clothes, I wouldn't recommend using any of those. So, should we talk about some examples of audio and films? Some good examples and some bad examples?
I think so. And then I think I have some additional questions for you on good and bad audio too.
Okay.
But we can start with the bad examples.
Yeah. Do you have a bad example for audio and film?
I think so.
What do you got?
But this is kind of leading into my question too for you. So I think Interstellar, Chris Nolan, is a good example of bad audio. Not because I believe that the audio was captured very cleanly.
Okay.
I believe that the mix was poor.
Oh, okay.
Because you hear the emphasis is definitely on the special effects.
Oh, yeah.
And the stuff happening and the music and even the score.
Yes.
So much so that there are points where you can't hear what people are saying.
Yeah. That's kind of a thing in films nowadays where a lot of those action movies, the dialogue gets mixed low.
Yeah. I feel like you see that in some of the Marvel movies too, even.
True. Mm-hmm.
So I was going to kind of lead that into a question for you, especially now that home streaming stuff is such a big deal and everybody streams video stuff, either through their TVs or maybe they actually have a nice sound setup at their home, or through laptops or through cell phones. Is there any way to kind of stay ahead of a bad mix? Because even if Interstellar was really good in theaters, I didn't see it in theaters. So even if it was really good in theaters, but it's just really bad on streaming, I mean, should they have remixed that? Was there a way to save that?
Yeah, that's a really tricky question because there's Dolby Digital Surround with all those different speakers, and I haven't even messed with that because I'm just an indie film sound guy.
Yeah. And
if you're looking at taking your computer setup and making it Dolby Surround for mixing, it's not cheap.
No, I would assume not, because it's like 5.1 or 7.1 or something like that.
Yeah, a lot of them I think now are 7.1, but 5.1 is where it starts. So you would need to have 5 monitors, which 2 are expensive enough.
Yeah.
2 monitors are not cheap for sound.
How much?
I'm talking about like not picture monitors, but
sound monitors.
Like sound mixing monitors.
Not a speaker. A sound monitor.
Yes.
Because they are different things.
Yes, a monitor speaker. Sorry, yeah. So they're...
No, I feel like they're kind of different things because like it's like the headphones, right? I have my headphones that I will listen to my music on because it has been EQ'd for it. Did I use the right word?
Yeah. Usually when your skull candies or whatever you're wearing, if they're not for mixing, then they'll have additional bass.
Okay, so aren't the speakers that you could just grab off Amazon really fast for like $15? Aren't those going to be EQ'd differently than sound monitor speakers?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
So if you just type in studio monitors or monitor speakers, there's a separate list of different and decent ones are going to push you like a few $100 a piece. Yeah, and
so
normally
5 to 7.
You normally buy just one of them. And actually, in a pinch, I've used these Mackies that we have set up in the studio here, and those are only $100 for the pair, which is pretty inexpensive. But they're only 3-inch speakers, so physically they can't produce that much bass.
Yeah,
because they're literally too small. So if there's noise, so they're not that accurate. So I had to buy a subwoofer if I was going to use those speakers, because if I'm making a mix for a film and there's something on the low end that would be distracting, that would show up on, I don't know, you have a film screening where they have a subwoofer and all of a sudden all this low end is coming out of nowhere and you were completely unaware of it because you mixed it with 3 or 4 inch speakers that can't reproduce those frequencies. So definitely screwed up there in a few occasions. So it's important to be able to monitor your entire frequency spectrum. But that's post-production stuff, I guess.
Yeah, a little bit. I guess that's fair. That's not as much location sound. Okay.
And you brought up a good point. I think that a lot of times it seems like in these Hollywood movies that the dialogue is mixed a little bit lower.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that would be. It might be because there is literally a center channel.
Yeah.
Where you push all the dialogue towards.
That's what it's supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you have a stereo setup, what that means is that both speakers are running that.
Yeah.
Simultaneously, but some of that stuff might be missed if you have both speakers then also pushing all the score and all the ambient sound and all the sound effects. So it might get lost there.
Okay.
When I think of bad sound, my shining example is Silicon Valley, the HBO series. It's a really funny show.
I have heard it's really funny.
Yeah, but their ADR, which is automatic dialogue replacement is what that stands for. So they did not get good location sound on some of those sets. I don't know. I mean, shows they have to film quickly. And so they had to get pickup lines. And you can hear, it's almost like the difference of them being in a room and then them talking on one of these microphones, because all of a sudden it sounds really close and you're like, well, they didn't get that they didn't get that line live on set. They just inserted it later. And then when they mixed it in, there wasn't enough care or effort put into place to make it sound the same. So it's very jarring. And if you ever watch Silicon Valley, you might know what I'm talking about. It's just randomly, they'll just have this one line and it's like, why does that sound like it's coming out of a really close microphone instead of the rest of the scene that we just listened to?
This entire scene where I'm struggling to hear what every character's saying, and then suddenly I heard, no, apple pie, really clearly.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's like, well, they were in a sound booth, and that's probably how they got that line. They recorded it later. So,
okay.
Yeah, that's an example of one of the bad ones.
All right. Any other bad examples?
Not that I can think of on the top of my head. ADR is usually what pulls me out of it. And it's annoying because I've done ADR. I've had to do ADR because we were in locations that were too loud. I didn't know how to correctly run the boom microphone.
Yep.
And if you ever go to Laura Gentry's YouTube channel and watch our first web series, which was called Canyon County, I had entire scenes that were silent, and it was a nightmare. That's when I learned always get the audio, always try to get the audio close, because we were doing some stuff in wides and the location was super noisy. I couldn't fix it. I didn't know how to fix it in post at that juncture.
Yeah.
And so I don't even know if I could, even if I went back now today, because I think it was just way too much noise and not enough volume coming from the actors. So we just had entire silent scenes where I ADR'd everybody. And it is really hard to get ADR because unless an actor has been doing it for a very long time, they're not gonna sync.
No.
9 out of 10 times, 9 out of 10 actors that we worked with, their lines just didn't sync up correctly in post.
No, because it's it's voice acting at that point.
Mm-hmm.
You need to make it, yes, it's you on the screen, but it's still voice acting. You have to get that same inflection, intonation, all of it has to be the same.
Yes.
And it's hard.
And that's what we learned is one of the reasons why a lot of times ADR sounds weird when they get those lines later on and they have to try to sync them up. It does sound odd, and it's because they're mixing the live sound with the sound booth recorded dialogue.
Yeah.
And just those slight variations in the actor's performance, even if the lips look perfectly lined up, it just throws it.
It does.
It throws a wrench in it.
Okay, so I've got a question for you.
Okay.
And this may be just your experience as a filmmaker or specifically for audio stuff. But if you've got a scene, because I've seen this happen a lot in indie films. If you've got a scene, some of the audio is bad. You know you have to do ADR on at least 1 or 2 lines, or else you're not going to get the lines. They are plot vital.
Yeah.
Would you just do those 2 lines and do your best to get it to line up? Or would you ADR the whole scene and hope that nobody notices?
I would not ADR the whole scene if I don't have to. I hate ADR. It's really hard. And doing
but
that
for
much,
a better finished product.
and doing all that Foley is bad too. That's another thing that I've learned.
That's fair.
That's
Okay.
another thing I've learned on set is if you can and you have enough channels, set up as many mics as you can to get sound. And I know sometimes it's hard if you're moving around with a boom, but if you can put some lavs somewhere out of sight to get some ambience, some things like that, so that you can mix it in later in post.
Yeah.
It all helps. If there's somebody moving on screen, you bring up a really good example. When you worked with Nick Fry on one of your films, you said that he was looking at the frame, and then he decided to mic a homeless person in the background that was
he
rustling.
saw on the frame, he was like, oh no, you see that guy all the way down at the end of the street there. I need to go set up a mic by him so that when he moves, there is something to accompany it in the final mix. And I was like, oh, I didn't even think about that because he's so far away. Like, but he's in the shot. So yeah, you should get sound for it.
Yeah. And in my opinion, the live sound is always better than using the canned stuff or trying to Foley it later.
Yeah.
It's just best to get as much of the live sound of anything that's on screen making sounds.
Yeah. But don't worry, we will go into Foley as an art in and of itself in some of our post-production episodes. But
yeah,
I'm excited for everyone to get to pick your brain about the Foley process as a whole.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we do mostly realistic fiction, so it's not too gnarly. It's just opening and closing doors. And so
That's
many.
not nearly as fun as getting
so
to
many
like
footsteps.
splat a watermelon or something.
Oh yeah, that
Dang it.
kind of stuff is fun too.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff is fun.
It's
All right.
exciting.
So I think we've been rambling on about sound for quite a while. I think that's all I really have.
Sound is so hard and such a vital part of a film that I was excited to take advantage of this opportunity to make you teach me more audio stuff so I know better for my own films.
Well, I wish I knew more, but as I continue to work location sound and screw things up from time to time, I will learn more. I know like the key takeaway here, I think, is to get the microphone as close as you can to the talent. Preferably a boom, but use a lav if you have to. Make sure that they're projecting over the top of whatever noise that you're fighting with in the environment. You just want to minimize the amount of noise if possible.
Yeah.
And throw those damn keys in the fridge, because shut that fridge off, and you don't want to waste anybody's eggs because they're way too damn expensive.
It's too expensive to do that now. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, anything else to add?
I don't think so.
Cool.
Anything else you wanted to add?
No, I just want to have a really tastefully short, succinct sign off.
Oh, okay. Well, goodbye.
Adios.